Good morning, good morning, good morning. Dr. Vibe here and Ryan West Coast Knight.
Listen, I haven't taken over the West Coast yet. I was only there for 2 days.
Well, we didn't think you'd be back so quick. We're
okay,
here.
Yes.
It's Monday, September 12th on the Morning Vibe. Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020, Best Podcast News Award winner 2018, Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and co-host and co-producer of the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dubman Plus Care. And I stayed in Toronto this weekend. Did Ryan?
Right, yes. Hey, I got to get more cultured and travel a little bit. But for those that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Knight, one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. So we work with entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage, really to figure out what stage their business is in and then help them create a strategy to grow their companies exponentially. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I run a company called Detailing Nights. So we provide mobile waterless car cleaning. And what I'm most proud of is our youth entrepreneurship program, which was running through the summer, a little bit into the fall, but it is winding down. And did get to talk to some people in Edmonton that might be interested to help us expand out west. So looking forward to that.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And of course, you'll see I'm rocking my PACU shirt. So it stands for the Pan-African Credit Union. If we want to see a Black-led and Black-serving financial institution come into being, please go to pacu.ca and pledge and show our community support, and we can become part owners of this credit union. But yeah, man.
Sorry. We got it. Before we go any further, hold on, Mr. West Coaster or Western. I wouldn't say West Coast, Western. As always, we'd like to say big shout out. This episode of the Morning Vibe is being sponsored by the Macmillan Group, providing mortgage solutions one client at a time since 1999, buying, refinancing, or investing. You can call them in Canada at 905-813-4354. In the US, you can call them at 904-586-5636. So I just wanted to get that in. And also, too, just an FYI for everybody, on this Friday's show, Ray McMillan is going to be with us, starting his monthly appearances on the Morning Vibe. So he's going to be talking about mortgages and real estate. So questions about mortgages and real estate. I know a number of people have been dilly-dallying or sort of thinking, what should I do with my mortgage? Should I lock it in? Rates are going up like 0.75%.
Lots of questions popping up.
Lots of questions. So bring your questions on Friday about real estate and especially mortgages. Ray has evaluated experience to answer them. So just wanted to get that and say, hey, Ryan, I had a feeling you wouldn't be up this morning.
And thank you to my beautiful wife that was able to allow me to get some sleep. I tried to sleep over on the trip, on the plane, in the airport, because I was into Edmonton, Saturday afternoon. And then I was out of Edmonton by Sunday afternoon. So It was a quick trip, but yeah, man, I get homesick quick. So being able to get back and then, still have some household duties to get get done, and then get some good sleep. So yeah, man, I'm back in refreshed.
Wonderful. Any highlights or moments you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, highlights. I mean, as galas go, they're typically really nice. I feel the Africa Center knocked it out the park. It was their 14th annual gala, so I would say it wasn't something that just popped up and they want to just pat themselves on the back. So shout out to Sharif Haji, who's the executive director of the Africa Center, and Dr. Philomena, who is, I think, one of the board chairs or on the board. I got to meet them. They were really actually surprised that I made it out from Ontario.
Yes, I would say too.
But I feel we should be, I would say, cross-country interconnecting a bit more. I know we kind of got to do it with Zoom and online meetings, but really getting to meet people in person, because I'd been talking with Sharif over email ever since the Black entrepreneurship ecosystem was put together. So we know of each other, we've talked, we've been on Zooms, but yeah, getting to meet him in person was really great. Getting to meet entrepreneurs out in Edmonton that were some of the booths at the center, getting to talk to them, introduce ACBN to them to say, hey, there's stuff that we can support you with, because now a lot of our programming is virtual, and also some of the funding is Canada-wide. But a big piece is connecting our two entrepreneurship programs. So understanding more about what the Africa Center is doing for entrepreneurs, and they do have a youth focus to it as well. And then understanding how ACBN's entrepreneurship programs can really connect, and then, get to brainstorming and seeing how we can really work together. But the event was wonderful. Again, I'm sure that all the galas will be wonderful, but I did get to ask the question that we left off here on, Friday, which was, how does this gala now move the Black community economically forward? And thank you to DJ Renard for that question. So I got to ask Sharif that question. I got to ask Dr. Philomena. I got to ask the actual entrepreneurs. I asked random people that I was sitting at the table with, who were wonderful, by the way. And the consensus, so I'll say what Sharif said. And it was really a point to highlight what they're doing to their bigger funders. So the gala is a way to really pull in, because government loves galas. I'll say other foundations. There's a certain, I don't want to say mystique, but you get to invite certain high-level officials, because they typically will show up to these things. And I'm talking about politics. So when they get there, now it's when you get to really put your plan in front of them. And I like that answer, because it didn't make me want to do a gala, but it did make me realize that you have to put your story in front of the government, in front of funders, in front of corporations that really want to support the Black community, but there's a language that they understand and they want to see results. So being able to showcase and really put your story out front is really important. But controlling our own narrative is the key. And I say that because their keynote speaker, Dorothy, and I don't remember her last name, but I will pull it up because she's definitely a woman that we need to connect with. She is the head of original content for Netflix Africa. And she was talking about how she was able to build and own her narrative and start a production company from scratch. And really, because she wasn't getting hired as an actor, her mom said, why don't you just start your own? It was just an amazing, amazing story. So getting to hear that story and talking about how to put your story in front of the right people, it really connected well. So Dr. Philomena, real quick, she mentioned that a lot of times people that are in the community don't really know what's happening. And the gala is kind of a jolt, a shot in the arm that puts the spotlight on an organization, and then they can really dig into what they do. So, I mean, take it for what you will. I would say
interesting. So, two quick questions. Was the event held in a building that was owned by melanated people?
No. And it was actually, I asked that question too. I was like, would you hold this in a building that's owned by melanated people? One, to hold 500 people, there are no buildings that are owned by melanated people. So that's interesting to think of. And two, because Alberta and Edmonton was hit so hard with, I'd say the gas prices initially going really low. Now that they're back high, they're really trying to re-spark the city. And of course, the pandemic. So the Edmonton Expo, they want to showcase Edmonton. So they actually co-sponsored or supported them in providing the venue. So it was more the city that was actually behind the gala and supporting them. So that was good to see too.
Okay, one other question. What percentage of the audience was melanated?
Oh man, if it wasn't 99%, it was like 98%. It was an African crowd. So I had to really represent for our Caribbean brothers and sisters. So
we're gonna get our two friends on and that may be a future conversation about. I see concerns between the relations between Africans who are melanated and non-Africans that are melanated. I've seen situations where Africans don't have those two groups can come into conflict, even though they have the same heritage. There can be some conflict. I don't know if you ever experienced it, but I have experienced it.
And it even goes a layer deeper. And it came up at our table when we were just chatting. Africans that are born here versus Africans that immigrate here. There's that conflict too. And it's same thing with the Caribbean. It's like it's a difference between Jamaican heritage like myself that's born here versus a Jamaican that immigrated here. So yeah, we have to be able to get these things on the table and talk about it.
Well, that leads very wonderfully into our conversation today about Jamaicans and this and that. So one of the fun things we've done recently, we do a lot of fun things, is we've had Janice and Marie on from Foodpreneur Lab. And last month we had them on about, lunchbox food. But today we're going to get a little bit serious, talking about a really important topic. So we're bringing Janice and Marie back. How are we, ladies? How are we?
Wonderful. Good. Thank you. Thank you for
having us. How was the weekend?
As I always say, not long enough, but good.
Very fantastic. Yes, that's good. Well, I heard that there was a little celebration going on over the weekend. Is that true?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Marie, would you like to answer that question, or do you? Well, we can't plead the fifth in this country. Just say, I don't know what you're talking about.
What happens on the weekend stays on the weekend.
Hello.
That's why it's the weekend.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll just stop right there. All right. So, how's the Monday morning going?
Monday morning's great.
Hey, you want to talk about? So I'm just gonna jump right.
Hey, 6 feet above ground. It's a great day.
It's true.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, we have you back because you have your monthly segment, Beyond Jerk, Reclaiming Food for the Diaspora. And for those who haven't checked it out yet, can you give us a little background about this monthly series, what it's going to be all about, and then we'll get right into our conversation topic. And I'm expecting Marie to do this because she did such a great job doing all of this.
I was just going to say, over to you, Marie.
Thank you.
Well, I think the basics of this segment is really to explore food beyond what we think Black food is. So, in this case, I'm in a room full of Jamaicans here, and we're going beyond jerk chicken to kind of explore all the different segments of food, some that don't get representation, some that do get representation, and really talking about topics that explore, Black people in food as well.
Love it.
So well done. Janice, where did you get it from again? Tell me. I'm telling you.
She's magic. That's all I'm going to say.
I appeared.
That's right.
But also let people know just like the name of the company that you also do run, just so we can plug that and capture it.
Absolutely. So we are Foodpreneur Lab, and we're a nonprofit that focuses on supports for Black food entrepreneurs who are looking to start and scale within our food sector. And so we are a recipient from the Black Ecosystem Fund. I've had the pleasure of working with Ryan even prior to our funding. So, you know, it's a brother that I'm talking to. And we've just had some wonderful opportunities to work with Black food entrepreneurs and see the innovative and amazing products that they're coming out with. And our mandate is to support them and help them and their business become sustainable and grow. So that's what we do.
Nice. And of course, Marie, being the efficient person that she is, she, like I said a few weeks ago, laid out monthly topics for the rest of the year.
I'm the planner. I told you, I'm the planner.
I mean, boom, boom. So today, and this has come up recently in the news, but we're going to take a little deeper dive in about the subject today, about, you know, reclaiming the farm table, how the term excludes Black farmers and the current farm conditions for migrant workers. So, ladies, I want to let you give an overview of this topic, and let's go.
I think before we even started thinking about the farmers, even the concept of farm to table, you know, 10 years ago in Toronto, that was a huge restaurant concept. And farm to table always evoked sort of like that white farmer, you know, in the barn picking up eggs. It was a very specific kind of cuisine. It was very Americana or Canadiana, but it never reflected who's in the field. It never reflected sort of who's doing the work. And so that term farm to table is sort of inherently white. And so it excludes us a little bit from a food perspective. And I think that was my jumping off place. And then, of course, everything that's happening in the news, and this has been happening for a very long time. And I think that there's a bigger conversation to be had about, you know, what's happening in current affairs right now.
Absolutely. And to Marie's point,
Go ahead.
Sorry, to Marie's point,
ahead,
I'm going to predate that from 10 years ago because I'm older than her. Actually, it's 20 years ago because I helped a chef launch a restaurant called Farm to Table. And so what actually was happening was it was an homage to farming, but it was more focused on the clean side of farming. Because when you say farm to table, it sounds so crisp and clinical and clean, and it just happens, right?
Yes. That farm table's not clean, you know? Like
Exactly. But nobody looked behind the veil. And so to Marie's point, now what's happened is the issues have now come to the forefront again. This is not new. This has been going on over 3+ decades and even more. And that's from just my knowledge of it. And so when we're having this conversation, we're going to start looking at the history of migrant workers, how integral they are, you know, and how many of our Black communities are integral to this process. So I look forward to using this program not only to educate, but to inform, because that's the whole purpose. That's extremely important to keep the conversation going in meaningful ways.
So a few things, and this became relevant to me that both Ryan and I recently, we went to a farm, not together, but to pick strawberries, and all the workers there were from Jamaica.
Yes.
And having a little bit of a conversation, not a deep dive, it was just very interesting to hear their experiences and hearing what things are going on in the front line. And also, I guess the question is, how much has this issue become forefront because of the pandemic?
So a couple of things. For those who don't know the concept of farm to table, it's the other alternative is called seed to plate. And we really look at planting to the end product that, okay, here you have your potato on the plate, and we follow that journey. And so when you look at the history of it, you know, Canada is the, I believe, 5th largest agricultural sector. We export, I believe it's $82 billion worth of agri-food that we export. So it's robust. But the question behind that, who's doing the manual labor? And it's migrant workers. And so to your point, Dr. Vibe, 10,000 Jamaican migrant workers come in every year for the last, I would say, 3 decades and more. Okay. However, does anybody have an idea how many the aggregate number of migrant workers actually come into Canada? Take a guess.
No,
Ryan.
Half.
Okay, 5,000. Okay, Dr. Vibe.
10.
Okay, Marie.
Ooh, I'm gonna go with 10,001. This is like Price is Right.
Okay, Price is Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So actually, it's between 50 and 60,000 migrant workers support the agri-food sector. Okay.
So I win and everyone loses.
50,000.
Between 50 and 60,000.
Oh.
It's a combination of Mexican and Caribbean migrant workers. There are 11 other countries of Caribbean workers are part of that. And of that, 10,000 are Jamaican. 85% of that 10,000, 8,500, return every year consistently for the past 30-something years, which means there's only a 20% infusion of new migrant workers that come in. Right. And so this tells you how integral we are to the planting, the harvesting, you name it, meat processing, you name it. And the ugly truth is, Canadians don't want to do that work. One, it's low paying. And here's the trade-off. It's still more money here than what migrant workers would earn at home. But nonetheless, it's still low paying.
But is that a reason why they deal with the conditions? Because it is that bump in pay, they don't want to risk. And I hear when they get interviewed, they don't want to risk losing it.
Of course, because it's a system that is based on some would say, and some have referred it to modern day slavery. I'm just going to throw it out there because it's been said. There's articles been written about it, right. and there's a bit of truth to it. But I want to have balance in this conversation because there are other factors. It's not so much that we acknowledge that the conditions are poor. And by the way, I want to say that it's not all farms that treat the migrant workers terribly. I just want to make sure, because you can't throw everybody in the same bundle. But the percentage that do not take care of migrant workers, that's where the disasters happen, and that's where you hear these stories. So back to your question, Ryan, which is, no, you're not going to upset the apple cart, because remember, if you are a disruptor, and that's how it's interpreted, right?
You're not coming back.
Precisely. You're not going to have that. And you have, 4 or 5 mouths to feed, and that's your only opportunity. Then, of course, so it is a form of modern day slavery in some sense, in terms of how limited you can be in terms of expressing frustration, the work conditions, how you're spoken to.
It's a policy issue, right? Like it's
very much so.
The way it's there are government rules that make it that the workers don't have as many rights because they're not technically citizens of this country, and there's little loopholes that make it much harder for you to have these conversations with your employer when your employer is essentially the only reason why you're even allowed coming back in.
Exactly. And to Marie's point, migrant workers do not have a pathway to permanent residency. And so that is one of the issues. And if you really step back and think about it, I have to tip my hat to a gentleman, Syed Hussain, who has been a huge advocate in getting that put in place, because the skill sets are required. So why not? Why not? Yes, so to Marie's point, it is a policy issue. So sorry, Dr. Vibe, back to you.
Yeah, why can't they get permanent status?
So, we're dealing with antiquated policies. You have to, if you look at our immigration policies, they are evolving. But what is causing that? Earlier retirements, we have an older age population. So now there is space, but there are just some sectors where Canadians are not interested in filling that gap. So you have no choice but to send out the call or summon from other countries. But I guess what we're saying is, if you want to bring migrant workers in, then what they're asking for is respect and acknowledgement of the work that they're doing, and dignity in turn, as well as decent living conditions. I can tell you, I lived in Niagara on the Lake, and that is fruit country, wine country. And I've seen some of the conditions where that these migrant workers live in. It's affordable in some cases. There is no indoor toiletry. It's outside. And I'm saying we live in 20 whatever XX, and they have to go outside to use the washroom. Like these, my question to you is, would you find that acceptable? Would that be okay for you or any family member? So therefore, how can it be acceptable for others? And this has nothing to do with class or economic status. Let's remove that. This is about decent living condition for others. And that's just accommodation. We're not talking about health benefits. What happens when they get sick? We saw instances where migrant workers came during COVID, and I believe 4 died while they were here. So the work didn't stop. The work continued at risk to them, and they showed up. And that is separate from any other fatalities that have occurred outside of COVID, whether it's, car accidents, on-farm injuries, fatalities. So, I mean, we really have to take a deeper look into how can we change or help support our workers that come here. So that when we bite into that apple, or we have those grapes and we're sitting watching TV, that we really give them the acknowledgement and respect, not in words, but in action.
And I wonder, and again, like to really put it on us, where when we do bite into we enjoy the fruits of that labor, and there's a certain level of ignorance that we accept, where we don't even want to know. And then if we do know, we hear it on the news, we're just like, well, what can be done? And really to shed that kind of mindset and start to truly ask the question is where it has to start. Because when we visited the farm to do the strawberry picking, and you're talking to the gentleman, and hey, we're out there picking the strawberries, it's really difficult to do that all day. So you can see why they have to bring in people that are able to actually execute. And because it's so difficult is why they deserve even more respect. Like you would think it would be the opposite way, where we should be laying out the red carpet for these people because they're doing something that is needed, like you said, and also that other people here aren't willing to do. But then we hear that it's the opposite of that, where they're in deplorable conditions. And again, like you said, not all of them, but there should be 0% of those living in bad conditions. And so now, where does the government come in to say, how do we mandate and make sure that anybody that you're bringing in is treated with respect and have proper living conditions?
Right. So one of the things we have to look at, let's look at the farmers. Let's start there. Here is the ugly truth about farming. It is expensive. Okay. It is not cheap to maintain a farm. And as a matter of fact, not for every dollar that a farmer earns, 95% of that, 95 cents of that dollar goes back into agribusiness. What is that? That's fertilizer, insurance, electricity. So it's not a cash grab. So if that much money, so for let's say 80%, if 80% of your revenue is going back into agribusiness, which is just to maintain the farm, and you still need somebody to come in there and harvest and everything else, that's difficult. And so you have to also look at the farmer's plight as well. They're not mutually exclusive, right?
It's a very unsustainable business.
Exactly. Gotcha. So if you look at it, at the same time, I can't fault the farmer because they're struggling. And as a matter of fact, If you look at the recent drought, I shouldn't say recent, the droughts over the last 5 years has affected cattle prices. They couldn't afford to buy fertilizer, so the crop that they actually grew that died out from the drought, they use that as feed. So I mean, they are struggling, throwing inflation and costs. And remember now, when a farmer goes to market to sell their food through I forget the cooperative that they're a part of. You don't go in there and say, oh yeah, I'm going to get $5 a bundle or whatever. 9 times out of 10, the price is already set regardless of what's happening. So you throw inflation in there, then it's a hot mess. And so it doesn't change. You still need the migrant worker. So it's difficult from that lens as well to really try and set up those conditions that would be deemed by definition acceptable when you're cash strapped, right? Yeah. So to your point, where does government play the role? It's definitely, as Marie said, it's a policy issue that has to be looked at. And if anybody thinks I am kidding about this, there is a report that was created by the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, MWAC. And the report was done in 2020, and it's called Decent and Dignified Housing for Migrant Farm Workers. And it's a 38-page document. I encourage people to read it to get educated, because to read it is something else, but to see it, it's heartbreaking. And I could almost guarantee when you went out there strawberry picking, you didn't see the back end of that.
You did not. Exactly.
No, you got to engage and enjoy the experience.
You got the Disneyland version.
Thank you, Marie. You got the Disneyland version. And so, my question becomes, even in conversation, they're not really telling you the real story. They're telling you the story that sells the experience. So always be, go ahead.
It was interesting because I didn't want to get too deep when I was talking to the gentleman that was helping us, but it was like kind of hinted towards, like,
it's inferred. It's
and
inferred.
Then you're like, man, if I ask this next question, I'm gonna have to turn into advocate, like Black Lives Matter, Ryan. It's like, with my kids, I'm like, you know what? Let me just, enjoy the Disneyland, and I'll come back. I'll be back.
Right.
But
But we have a broken food system, right? So even when we talk about policy, it's a multi-prong approach to all the different kinds of policies that would need to be repaired and examined in for this to be fixed. And I think one of the things to remember is, as Janice mentioned, this is an unsustainable system. And anywhere where people are being squeezed for money, there's going to be exploitation. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the end result of everyone wants to save a buck. Food is expensive, right? And people can't afford to feed themselves. And yet you have food that needs to be picked. You have people who are starving, and then you have food that needs to be sold. Then you have food that's going bad. And the fact that these three things are happening at the same time, it just feels like something's wrong. There's plenty of food to go around, but somehow it's not getting to those who need to eat it. And so this is part of the issue that we're seeing as well.
Absolutely. Well said. Go ahead, Dr.
I just want to jump in, and I got 1 or 2 questions from Facebook. So the first question here, Christopher says, are there any grassroots organizations that are advocating for migrant workers?
Yes, MWAC would be one of them. I personally don't know of others. I'm just going from my own limited experience in terms of these organizations. I'm just more aware of what's been happening with migrant workers because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've met some smaller organization while I lived in Niagara-on-the-Lake who either took it upon themselves personally to advocate. And by the way, they weren't Black. They just said nobody should live in these conditions. So I hope that answers. But and again, there are 2 things going on. There's the migrant worker. Or I should say more than 2. There's a migrant worker. There's farm. There's a policy issue. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. How many Black farmers exist? How many Black farmers actually own land? Okay. So there in itself, that's a problem right there, because we talk about food insecurity, we talk about food sovereignty. And if we want to have ownership of addressing these issues, well, we need a place to grow. And so farmland is limited. And so if we take a hard look, we don't have generational farms, right? We don't have that. So question is, so where do we start? It's almost like coming late to the housing market. If you didn't buy a house in the last 6 decades, at
Rent
what
for
point
life.
that's right. At rent for life. There you
Rent
go.
for
At
life.
at what point do I jump in? Because wherever I jump in, it's going to be the deep end, right?
Yes.
So the question becomes, how do we address this? And there are some other issues as well. You know, one of the problems that we have with farming is that, you know, you have to make sure it's what they call arable land. And arable land it's classified as land that can be plowed for the purpose of growing crops. But in order to maintain that, you have to have crop rotation. How many farms do we know only grow specific crops? And so that is what is causing the deterioration as well, because the rotation is essential to the fertility of soil. So what we've seen is we saw an industrial shift into farming that said, okay, you're going to grow potatoes, you're going to grow,
Soy.
so exactly. And so this has contributed to the failure of farming as well, where we've shifted because it's mass production, get as much as you can. So then my next question becomes, okay, how do we change that? And one of the conversations, you know, I've been having for the last 5 years is that vertical farming has to be part of the solution. And not everybody's a fan of it. And for those of you who don't know what vertical farming is you set up a space. It can be portable or not, but you set up a space. It doesn't require very much. It's indoor, and it can either be hydroponic, aquaponic, and I forget the third one is. And you grow the crop, and you get much better yield, and it's not exposed to external environments. And so that is a quick fix. However, you're limited to certain crops because right now we're still experimenting, you know, on what kind of crops we can grow. But nonetheless, it's a solution. And what I would like to see is, I want to see that more in urban communities. That has to be in our communities. That has to be part of the solution, because on the far end we talk about food waste and food upcycling and everything else, but we really have to look at, okay, how do we solve this problem? And it has to be private and public partnerships. It cannot be a standalone solution.
And I'm so curious around the entire industry, and I mean beyond just agriculture. Now we're talking about capitalism, and
yes,
at both sides of the spectrum, you'll see an Amazon that the margins are massive and they're still exploiting their workers. And then in agriculture, farming, the margins are slim and they're exploiting their workers. So it might not be just that agricultural issue. It's just, how did this capitalistic mindset take over all industries? And I mean,
the food from the market, it doesn't just go to the farmer's market, right? It also goes to the grocery store, and the grocery store needs their markup as well. And all of those layers, and then you Instacart, and then you start adding all of those different layers of everyone needs a buck along the way, right? Everyone's getting squeezed along the way.
Well, and that's where, how do we now relieve the pressure from the farmers to say, okay, right now, how it's set up, you're being squeezed. So your argument is going to be like, oh, this is what I can afford for their hospitality for the migrant workers. But then have you seen any shift to how we increase the margins for the farmers so that they'll now be able to reinvest? Or you'll see something like CMHC, which is the housing corporation, them investing into the living quarters of migrant. Like, I'm curious what kind of solutions we can start to brainstorm to like alleviate that.
Right. So I think you hit the nail on the head right there in terms of policy plus creating new models similar to CMHC that will help provide better conditions, and having that conversation and creating a strategic plan that doesn't say, oh, this is what we're going to do and not execute, but it's actually executionable. And I'm going to give a shout out to Jacqueline Dwyer from I think she's from the Toronto, was it the Toronto Black Market, Marie, that we met with in Downsview? Yes, she has been an advocate, I would at least say 2 decades. And we had a very in-depth conversation with her, and I could just fully understand her frustration, which is her mandate is to create grow local within the Downsview community and provide food for the local community to address food insecurity and food sovereignty. And yet she can't get access beyond 2.5 acres of land. Yet, other people have come in, non-melanated or otherwise, and have acquired vast amounts of land and infrastructure support to grow in other areas. And so when you see that, you automatically say, okay, well, is that because I am lower on the ranking system? Or is it because I don't have somebody who is helping to advocate my needs? Because the need hasn't changed. In 2 decades, she's been saying, listen, this is coming, and here it is. And when you speak to her, she hit the nail on the head. She saw what was coming. And yet the needle has barely moved. And so here we are, we have to go back to government and say, listen, we know you have some farmland lying around, or we also have to talk to developers who may be interested in sharing some of those lands as well, whether it's short-term or long-term, and coming up with models that say, okay, we will parcel out X number of acres and you can grow, and we identify the area that we're going to provide food and support communities and work in tandem with that. But this nonsense where we have to continuously go and cap in hand and asking for some money so we can plant seed to feed a community is not only shameful, but we shouldn't have to.
I feel like Ryan kind of hit it at the top of the segment when he was talking about languages in order to speak to certain sectors and governments and sort of acquiring that knowledge. And, you think about it, and a lot of these things are policy, and yet these aren't things that we're taught in school. These aren't things like, we don't have a good handle as to, if you want to make a change, how do you start that? How do you start lobbying? How do you start making those changes? And so it means that people are frustrated, but they don't always have access to being able to make those changes happen in a meaningful way. I wanted to go back to the question that was asked on Facebook. There is another organization called Migrant Rights Network. And they're they're in Canada, but they're actually organizing essentially like a massive mobilization event throughout Canada on September 18th. So if this is something that's interesting to people, you can see more on their website. It's migrantrights.ca.
Yeah. And it's so funny in our conversation, as I've come into this sphere of food, somebody said to me, oh, food insecurity. And I said to somebody, food insecurity, ain't that hunger? I mean, I don't care what label you want to put on it. That means that's hunger, no matter how you call it. Okay, it's semantics. It's hunger. So, we have to address that. And the issue is it has rapidly increased over the last 2 decades. Let's call it out for what it is. So the question is, how do we measure that to see how far we've moved? Because that's also, there has to be some accountability.
I think one of the interesting things that happened with the pandemic, much like all of the broken systems, everything got highlighted, right? The hustle and bustle of everything that happens in your day, where you get to not even to willingly ignore things, but you're so busy, you got to go with the flow. You got to pick up the kids, you got to make dinner, you got to get with your life, go to work. And then when everything just kind of halted, all of those broken systems kept working, and they got louder and louder and louder. And we saw it with, racism, and we saw it with obviously issues with the farming and with food and with prices and inflation and, all of the systems that were broken, all of them, we saw them highlighted. And we all had sort of time to sort of say, well, wait a second, how long has this been going on? Because I know even myself, like I've been in the food industry for 10 years, but some of the issues, some of like the root problems with migrant working and their conditions, that has only come out in the last couple of years, I think, on a mass scale, where everyone is now, you can't hide from it. You can't say, I didn't know.
And that's where I felt like I started to actually hear about it and understand it. And I felt like because the pandemic put a halt on extracurricular activities, now everybody that had been complaining, finally the voices got loud enough. But one piece, and Janice, you mentioned it, when I was flying to Edmonton, I'm always marveled at when you get into the plane and you get to see, that bird's eye view and of all the unused land. Yes. And then you mentioned it too, where Jacqueline, like, we're not going to turn Jacqueline into a blonde-haired, skinny white woman that can go lobby at government and, have the proper pitch deck and well, you can create the pitch deck, but the image that government wants to see and the language that they want to hear, that has to be all packaged to get this land. And again, developers have this down to a T. They have staff that is focused on lobbying and advocacy and getting this land, where us as in the Black community do not have dedicated. It's volunteers. It's people that are already doing. It's the actual farmers that are also doing the advocacy. So now to layer on this whole lobbying layer, it's needed. And I wonder if that's where the Black entrepreneurship ecosystem can start to lend our resources to these types of priorities.
Well, we've seen it with their participants. It's like the access is codified, right?
Totally, at every level.
Yes. And same with business, right? I mean, we have some of these difficult conversations with our participant and being like, is your $12 jerk sauce going to be in a Caribbean store, or is it going to be at Pusateri's? Do you plan on having it at like Walmart, where like Betty Sue from Thunder Bay is buying it? Like where's your product being placed? And that's an important aspect, because when you're building your brand, it needs to speak to who you are, but it also needs to attract your target audience as well. And these are some challenging conversations to have, because you're not necessarily building a product for yourself. You built it, it's your product, but you also have to release it and recognize that other people have to connect with it. And so again, this is where that decodification and understanding multiple markets and how to operate in a business world come into play.
Yeah. To Ryan's point earlier, you said Marie was saying, "Oh yeah, we were busy, we were running around," and Ryan said, all of a sudden I'm more aware. That was when everything came to a standstill. So Ryan, we were no longer distracted. And 100%. that was the lie. We were being distracted by so many different things. And so when everything shut down, we were forced, and we had to recognize the fragility of our systems that we were running around unaware of. And those of us, including myself, who were saying, look over here, this is coming, this is the problem, and nobody would listen. Here we are now. So
welcome back, Dr. Vibe.
Sorry for the technical challenges, no problem, but I'm gonna just go on, and we've got some questions here from the audience. Client Whisperer says, is there a current list of Black Canadian farms? If so, how can the Black ecosystem help identify the correct farm or farmers so we can help scale their farm, providing our supply chain farm to table?
That is coming, that's in the works. Because, and I say that because remember, the Canadian government has not been collecting data on Black communities. Okay, right. So we are just starting to do that. So it's going to take some time. And how does that happen? Well, you have to do reports. You have to do the deep dive. You have to find who exists, how long have they existed, and who's now entering into that market. Because for Black communities, we don't necessarily volunteer our information either. We tend to hide underground, and we're very comfortable doing that. And so part of the Black Ecosystem Fund, and in terms of our mandate that Ryan and myself and the 28 other recipients, is to get Black entrepreneurs above ground, legitimize their existence, because we have thrived in a Black market economy. We're very good at that. Hands down, we got that covered. Okay.
Yes. It's true.
It's shifting us to say, hey, listen, we need to come above ground, and here is why. When you come above ground, that those tax dollars that you are paying is now growing that ecosystem, is now creating those list of Black farmers, this list of Black entities that we can now proudly and boldly support. And so that requires a level of education, because it's a learned behavior. And so we're asking them to come out and be comfortable. But I always say, if you're providing accountability and you know how your money is being spent and where it's being spent, it's a lot easier to get people to participate. And to Ryan's point in his introduction, for PACU, that is just an example based on what I am saying.
All right. Another question here. Ray, good morning, everyone. Great conversation. Is the fact that farming in first world nations, Canada included, is heavily subsidized part of the reason for farming inefficiencies?
Absolutely. I don't think there is one sector within Canada that's not subsidized to some degree. Now, why is that? I could argue that perhaps the demographics didn't exist, but I could also counter argue that and say, hey, listen, we're heading into 8 billion people come 2050. The question is, will those 8 billion people have money to spend to feed themselves? That's the concern. And that's not taking into deterioration of land, because we can't plant, so we can't grow. Climate change, for those who choose to ignore or say it doesn't exist. You put those two together, we are heading to a bigger problem. So again, it's the conversations, but more importantly, the solutions. And it's not, my frustration is, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we have to try. We have to try some solutions. So what do I mean? If we have to subsidize $1 million to urban communities to try vertical farming, then let's try that. Let's pilot that with internships. And that's what I want to see. That is what I'm advocating for with Foodpreneur Lab, to start those programs, to bring in youth, for them to understand how integral our agricultural system is, not only to our communities, but to our health and our mental stability. Because again, the two go hand in hand. How we eat and how we take care of ourselves is closely related to how we perform and the wellness of our families. So you can't pretend one has nothing to do with the other. And so it's the benefits are exponential. So you create the vertical farms, you create the experience, you create the education, and in that education, you're now introducing youth to areas where they never knew existed, to new technology, to AI, and so they're now invested. Even in that smallest introduction, there is an awareness, and when you are aware, you start to take responsibility. It's almost like the epiphany. Once you know, you can't go back, right?
I think what's interesting about subsidies as well is that they have global impacts. So,
yes,
how Canada, United States, I think of the states and I think of the subsidies that they receive on things like rice and corn, and how that will impact Jamaica. It'll impact like different countries. I know at one point, Haiti was self-sustaining with regards to its agriculture. And then there were subsidies in the United States with regards to rice. Haiti is the number one importer of, or number one or number two importer of rice in the world, because we don't grow our own rice anymore, right? Those subsidies, they hurt local farmers. And so
thank you.
when we start talking about buying local and all of these conditions, we also have to think about the fact that, like, we'll fly an orange all across the world for it to end up back at Loblaws, right?
Yes.
We will do all kinds of really weird things with our food system just to get the quickest buck. But these have impacts that are global.
Absolutely. And to Marie's point, I don't know if any of you ever watched there was a documentary done about Jamaica and the relationship with the IMF. And the relationship with those subsidies. Now, in Jamaica, we have cows. We had a milk board, and we produce milk. When they took that money and they took those subsidies, they could not sell the milk. The farmers had to pour the milk out on the streets because they could not bring it to the cooperatives for sale. And so similarly to Marie's point, this is exactly what's happening to us. We are importing produce that we can grow. Why are we doing that? We've been doing this for decades and thus contributing to the problem globally. At some point, we're going to have to say, listen, time out. We're going to take ownership and we're going to grow our own stuff. And then anything that we can't grow, then we can look at, because we've exhausted all opportunities. Okay, fine. We can't grow guavas. Okay, right. Then you and I will have a bilateral agreement where import, export is reciprocal. That's how it should be working. But to deny farmers to get a proper price for their grains or their produce because they're part of a cooperative that's already set prices is what's killing the system.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. I fully agree with that. Now, more questions coming. I hope you have a little bit more time.
Yeah.
I know Janice is on the clock, so you have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do our best.
Okay. Ray has another question. While vertical farming is an option, isn't greenhouse farming an easier fix for Black Canadians? I have seen other migrant communities execute this quite effectively and efficiently.
Yes, it is, if you can find the land. All roads lead back to the same problem. Who is going to give you a 2.5 acres or 3 acres? Because remember, you can get the land, but the question becomes how much land and how much are you yielding? Because the whole purpose is you want to feed a community. So 2.5 acres may not be sufficient enough. You may need 5. So you can't just go into Toronto and go, hey, listen, I'm looking for 5 acres of agricultural land. Good luck with that. Okay. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
what is land primarily used in Toronto? Condos.
Yep.
Condos, right?
Yes.
I mean, we see the city carving out designated areas to plant trees, for God's sake. I mean, we're going to put a park. You have to mandate to put a park. Like, that is where we're at. So here we are. We need stuff to eat. This is not even recreation space I'm talking about. This is about space we need to feed ourselves. Okay. And yes, greenhouses are a much faster fix if you can find them, if you can partner with developers who own these lands, or the government who has the inventory, the secret list of these lands that are underutilized. That's what we got to get our hands on.
And then once you get that land, you also have to consider that the soil has to be in a good, healthy spot to grow anything, right? So there are a lot of things to consider, but yeah, those are good points.
Hayden asks, is the heart of the problem big agribusiness controlling all of the agriculture?
Of course. Of course. I mean, that's a very nice way of putting it. Yes. Yeah, it's unfortunate because they've been at the table longer. So, he who has the goal makes the rules, right? Yeah. That's why it's called the golden rules. So
there you go.
But that's not to say we can't get a slice of that. You have to start maybe with the crumbs and build up as you go. Okay. But we have to start somewhere.
Yeah. And just the last conversation with Christopher from Facebook question. Are there meaningful partnerships that can be tailored to perhaps assist or aid these emerging issues?
Absolutely. Right now, we're in conversations with some potential partners, and I'm hoping that once we're able to clearly identify what we want to see, and we're all in alignment, we will make an announcement, and this will be significant. That is the intention. And so the hope is not to just put a lens and say, oh yeah, so and so is partnering, but it's also to make sure what we're doing is quantifiable, and in the sense that there's a measurement and a metric and an outcome that is going to be seen and experienced in the way of, oh, we've supported X number of communities by growing X number of vegetables and everything else. Because at the end of the day, that's the story, that's the narrative, right? It's not so, oh yeah, we're in partnership. How many partnerships have we seen where we have not been the beneficiaries and yet we are partners? So I'm extremely, extremely cognizant of that. And Marie will always tell you, I'm always looking for what's the measurement, because the measurement is the litmus test of your action.
I think there's also an opportunity to continue to teach
Yes.
farming practices to the community, right? So
Yes.
it's much like everything else. It's one of those skill sets that's maybe not continuing from generation to generation. So if we became more sustainable, more self-sufficient as a community, that would also help, I think, with some of those issues as well.
Yeah.
Well, I did hear someone's notification go about 2 minutes ago, so I know one of you three has a meeting.
That's Marie.
Okay, not you this time.
Nope,
I'm
not
back
me.
to back today. It's brutal. It's brutal.
Yes.
Okay, so you know what? We're gonna let y'all go, but again, thank you so much. Great segment.
Thank you
I
for having
mean,
us.
so informative. Thank you for both taking the time out of your positive, productive schedules. Invite me to your next outing. I'm getting tired of seeing all these things you do on Instagram and you're not inviting me. Like, I'm going, what did I do? Like, I don't on this list. I got to get on the next one. I want a picture of me on the Foodpreneur timeline on Instagram.
All right, Dr. Vibe. Every Friday and Saturday from now until the end of September, we're doing a pop-up at Junction Brewery.
Okay, sweet.
All right.
Yes.
So there's some really delicious food that one of our participants is going to be preparing there. And
we will chat offline. I would like to see if I can get down there this week.
Please send that to us as well so we can put it in our newsletter.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
all the time and exciting today.
That's amazing.
All right, well, ladies, thank you so much again. Have an outstanding week, and thanks for making our lives better.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take care. Have a great day.
You too.
Another great segment, man.
Awesome.
Another great segment.
And it's information that we need to know, but not just hear about.
Okay, now last time
dig in.
We had bonus time because there was a question. Now there's a question here, and I don't know if I want to bring, because last time we brought Janice back on. Now I know Maria has her meeting, so I ain't gonna bring her back on because I heard her notification. See, okay, we're gonna bring Janice back on. Bonus time.
All right,
here we go.
I think we're gonna have to start putting in a bonus round.
The lightning round.
So here's another question. Client Whisper goes: if someone gave our community 200 acres outside of Toronto, 1 hour with 110 of those acres land for farming, is there a plan in place to run a productive farm?
Client Whisperer, from your lips to God's ears, hallelujah, yes. Okay.
Yes.
200 acres, absolutely. You have to keep in mind, we have not had that opportunity. But if it's presented, we're gonna make it work.
Yeah.
Because it's integral to our survivability. It's not that we can't do it, it's that we haven't had the opportunity to do it. There's a big difference. And so with modern day farming, you could have a hybrid. You can have greenhouses, you could have vertical farming, and you could have traditional farming, subject to soil consistency and testing. I want to put that in there because remember, certain soil is conducive to certain growing crop, right? So just so we understand that. But absolutely, and that would be so far reaching, because I tell you, if you have that 200 acre farm and the Black community is aware of that, You bet your bottom dollar we
We
are
make it
all
work.
going precisely. We're gonna
We'll make it.
come together and we are going to make it work.
Just to piggyback on Janice's, look what we've done with the little we've been given.
Imagine
That's it.
imagine what could happen if we had more. And so
Absolutely.
that is what we're trying to do. Is listen, this is not about our ability. Do not be fooled.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming out for both. This is twice back to back now, bonus
That's all right.
time. Like,
That's all right.
So
because
good.
but look, and because whenever I chat with Janice, almost every time she has this vision of having a complex or some sort of facility. So this is not a short-term thing. She's been very passionate for a long time about
Thank
this.
you.
She's in it to win it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I also want to highlight how you said today that people are not realizing, with a lack of food and farm sustainability, all the domino effects,
Yes.
emotional health, mental health,
yes.
physical health. It's a domino effect.
Yes. And for Black people, food is our medicine. Don't ever forget that. If you look at the history when you were sick, what did your parents give you? A herb here, something over here. You know, food is our medicine. And so historically, it's integral to our survival. It's as simple as that. It's not complicated.
We're going to let you go. We're not bringing it back
Thank
now.
you.
All right. I think, like I said, like I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to see if I can pull it out. No, I can't. Drop the mic.
Thank you.
That was
Thank
a drop
you.
the mic moment.
Oh,
Thank you
man.
again
Yes,
for coming
love
back.
you.
All right.
Always.
That's it.
You guys
All right.
back
Take
at you.
care.
Love
That
it,
was
love it.
fun. That was a great way to end off the conversation, man.
Oh,
Are we
absolutely.
gonna get? You know what, Ryan? So this is one of the things we're gonna try and do before it gets colder. We're gonna see if Ryan and I can go to this farm together,
Yes.
and not only pick, but maybe even have a conversation. I don't know how. Just see if we can dig a little bit deeper.
Yes.
And get
At
from the-
minimum to ask the question. And it's
Just
not
ask-
to dig, it's to just, hey,
Get the truth.
how are things? Exactly.
Yeah, because when I went to the farm first, the gentleman I was speaking, he had been coming there every summer for 17 years from Jamaica. And then he introduced me to another gentleman that's been coming to that same farm every summer for 37 years.
And isn't that exactly what Janice said? How it's the same migrant farmers coming. So even more so, they should be respected. And again, it'd be interesting to learn about how the farm we're talking about is treating them. But respect overall has to be there.
It's interesting too that the migrant workers cannot get citizen status. And on one of my other platforms, Black Canada Talking, they always, especially Cesar and Elle and Sarah, always say, "Isn't it interesting? The Canadian government is really fast tracking citizens from Ukraine to get
Syria, Afghanistan.
Like there's a
they
fast
can
track
get it
there.
done. Yeah, it's within their ability to do it, yet we see them not do it in certain areas. So we have to really put pressure on them about that.
Absolutely. What is up for the rest of your week, sir?
Oh, wow. I feel like this week I didn't plan a lot. So there are the meetings sprinkled in here and there. There is a breakfast that, oh my gosh, Real World Film Festival is doing for TIFF. So this will be my first foray downtown to TIFF. Although I walked through yesterday because I was downtown to take the GO train back. I was like, I kept hearing music. So I was following the music, and then I ended up on King Street just walking through TIFF. It's a wonderful setup. It was the first time I've ever gone. So I'm going to head back for that breakfast. But this weekend, do you go to TIFF at all?
I haven't been to TIFF in a long time. I used to like to get tickets to cover certain things. It's not on my radar anymore because really I'm very focused on things, and it's just not me anymore. It's like I know everyone got to entertain and show off themselves, but after it's finished,
and you would think they would highlight now more Black production studios.
Well, it seems that they are. Like, of course,
but, I mean, like, who is actually starting those studios, and how does TIFF help people start studios?
Well, if we could ever do it, I'd love. Many years ago, I had a chance to interview Cameron Bailey when he was second in command at TIFF. He is now in command, and actually, we have somewhat of a linkage because his father, who passed away a few years ago, and my dad knew each other for 25 years.
Okay, yes.
But if we could get a state of, and this is maybe something that we can get Dr. Tachi to come on, just a state of the film distribution, because yeah, we do a lot of things and all that, and the other, yes, someone said we need to bring on Tanya Williams. Yes, we do need to. Brian,
we had been working on it.
We need to bring her on. Yes. But I think this is just a part of me. The more and more I see, there's more and more symbolism.
Right. But this is where I feel now is the time we can identify symbolism and put pressure to turn it into something tangible. Like just seeing symbolic things, we have to be able to point it out and say, you know what, instead of this only being a symbolic gesture, how do we now turn it into infrastructure, something tangible and long lasting? Yeah. But the people that create the symbol have to be willing for that conversation. So let's
I know people want to look good in their dresses and all that stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, and you can come at me if you want, but yeah, how does that help the greater collective?
And you know, I was walking through, and so they were setting up for one of the premieres, and you know, everybody lines up for the stargazing. I wonder if TIFF, either if they already do this or doesn't, they should do a red carpet for all the workers behind the scenes and just make people see who's actually making these films and these TV shows. Yeah. And yeah, it's nice to look at the stars that are on front of camera, but we should really highlight and make a big deal out of the people behind the camera too.
It's interesting. I think we're living in a culture more and more people don't care about the stars. They're tired of.
Okay. Nah, man, they are lined up.
I know they still are, but I think
to watch.
You know.
Yes.
You know, I think that. Yeah, well, that's a whole other conversation. Let's just leave it at that. Yes. Anything else going on this week?
No. I'm looking forward to our Friday conversation with Ray McMillan from McMillan
Ray
Group.
McMillan, yeah. Everybody, Friday, Ray McMillan's going to be on talking about mortgage and real estate. The first of a number of conversations we're going to be having with him monthly, and we're really excited about that.
And we're going to continue our debates, not arguments, about where's the best place in the world.
Oh, yes.
Our Black community to build from. Where can we call headquarters?
So should I put on my black and white jersey?
Right.
Referee, you and Ray? All right. If you want to catch replays of this epic conversation, you can catch them on the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and Facebook, Afro-Caribbean Business Network on Facebook and YouTube, and the Ryan Oneil Knight YouTube page. So everyone, thank you for hanging out with us again. We appreciate it. Don't take it for granted. And also too, if you would like to be a sponsor of the Morning Vibe Show, Morning Vibe Show, do contact me. Actually, someone reached out to me after last night saying they may want to sponsor the Friday shows because Ray's got Monday locked down for a while, everybody.
Yes.
So look, as always, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. For those who are enjoying TIFF, enjoy. But what happens the day after TIFF finishes?
True.
See you Friday.